Watch, Listen is a game development podcast from game developers ALANAH, that's me, hi, I write video games, Mike Bithell, who is a game director, and Austin Wintory, who is a video game composer. At least it's mostly about game development. Sometimes we just talk about culture, like in this episode. Which related, thank you so much to our supporters on Patreon, who are the reason that we can have episodes like this that are not about chasing trends or specific topics and are just genuinely organic conversations between friends. We appreciate your support. You are the reason the show exists and that it remains entirely sponsorship free. Patrons also got an unedited extended version of this episode, and they got it about 2 weeks early for this particular one. But whether you support the show on Patreon or not, we appreciate you being here and we hope you enjoy the episode. But yeah, speaking of which, I was just in the Mediterranean. I went to...
Oh, that's right. You wanted to talk about Gaudí.
Nice. I did want to talk about Gaudí. I went to Italy, France, and Spain. Florence was very, very cool because of Assassin's Creed. Not that it wasn't cool anyway, but I really did keep going.
Because they built it, haven't they? They've built all the stuff from Assassin's Creed
on Assassin's Creed, yeah.
Based on Assassin's Creed, they've gone and built all that stuff. It's really cool.
Kind of like going to Universal Studios where they leave the setup.
Exactly. It's so cool. No, my sister and I kept being like, "Where is Claudia?" It's super fun. And then we went to Sète in France and Toulon in France, and both of those are also really beautiful. Sète's this tiny little fishing town, though I guess not tiny, and then it's like one of the largest fishing ports in the whole Mediterranean. And Portofino and a bunch of really pretty places on the coast because it was a cruise, obviously. But yeah, before we had to reschedule, I was excited to talk to you both about Gaudí. Because we did this day tour of a whole bunch of Gaudí's works in Barcelona, which anyone who doesn't know, Gaudí is, I'm inclined to call him an artist, but I suppose his official title is architect.
Technically, yeah.
Would anyone dispute that architect is a type of artist in the same way that, artist need not mean painter, a composer is an artist and a game designer is an artist.
The only architect friend that I have, I only know one of them, would say no. He considers himself almost a technical engineer. Less so an artist.
All I
know from films is a great job if you're the protagonist in it or the love interest in a romantic comedy. That's the only thing I know
except if it's Heavy Rain, where I think he's also an architect, right?
Oh, that's true. It is the stock job for person who has interesting
male job is architect, female job is journalist.
Yeah.
Everything.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that there are many ways in which, yes, you could consider architect artist to be synonymous, but I would also think that there are others in which it is very technical. Does something being technical make it not art?
It's very us to get caught up on this.
I was going to say,
this is good.
I've always cut to the chase on this one and basically said that literally any human endeavor can be considered art. Especially, like, I would go to the things that almost everyone would agree as their default is not art. So, for example, say you're an accountant who spends all their time making spreadsheets. Well, let's say I've been doing that for 50 years and I see someone make just the most beautifully efficient, waste-free, clearly laid out spreadsheet. What kind of language would I use to describe that if not to say, this is just a work of art. You have elevated what is normally a very, kind of mundane task into something actually quite beautiful. And I go, I don't see why we should, by definition, exclude anything from that, even if 99% of the time the people doing that task don't think of what they're doing as art, aren't aspiring to make it artful in any way. I remember
the everything is kung fu argument, right? I
like
heard
what
that
you're
term.
saying, but I don't.
Have you never heard that? Like everything can be kung fu. That's like
no, I've never heard that.
A cliche term. Yeah, everything's kung fu. If done to a high enough standard, everything is kung fu.
Yeah, I had a cousin. She was technically my grandfather's cousin. She was my grandfather's generation, but so I don't know what. It's still some variant of cousin. I'm pretty sure
third cousin,
related
maybe?
to me, but. Well, I never understood. Yeah, it was just, to me, anything that's not, brother, sister, father,
Cousin,
mother
whatever.
kind of thing. It's just cousin.
If you're counting the number of cousins, there's already a bad thing. Just
Cousin.
at that point, just
it's kind of like saying auntie.
Cousin.
It's a catch-all.
It's like a lot of things. If you start really paying attention to the numbers, you've gone down a bad road.
My step nephew is my age, so I just call him my cousin.
Yeah. So in that vein, so my cousin, from my grandfather's generation, I spent a lot of time with when toward the last 10-ish years of her life, when I was in my 20s, and she lived in Manhattan, and she had a woman who would come help her clean and stuff, and would come with groceries, and would frequently they had like a bowl for fruit on the table, and she would always take great care to aesthetically arrange the fruit, just because it's a nice gesture for the 90-year-old woman to walk into the room and see. And the 90-year-old woman was a painter, and so and a really damn good one too. And so there was something thoughtful about going, I just need to store fruit on the table, but I am going to approach this with an aesthetic consideration. And Sonia, my cousin, would always notice and make a comment, and I look at that and I just think, I don't see what there is to gain by fencing certain things off. You know what I mean? Even if, again, 99% of the time, certainly when I put fruit on the table, it's not going to resemble a painting, guaranteed. But I don't see the reason for not. Anyway, I don't want to derail off of Gaudí. So, like you said,
Gaudí, artist/architect. Continue.
Yeah.
Okay, that line of thought was too interesting, but I'll let it go. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
because I want to be like, well, there isn't anything to gain from many things. And anyway, so I went and saw a bunch of Gaudí's works.
This is me just stemming from. Just sorry, but my closing comment. This is a tail end of when I was sort of coming of age with that game company. And that was the apex of, Roger Ebert and those people online saying video games cannot be art. And I remember thinking a lot about this question at the time and going, under what possible definition could it not be? And
I didn't even know there were people saying that.
Which game was it that Cliffy B said he wished Roger Ebert was still alive for or something?
Probably Gears of War.
Specific game. I think it was BioShock Infinite. And there's like a famous tweet from Cliffy B being like, Roger Ebert was wrong and I wish he was still alive so you could see it. BioShock Infinite is a work of art or something like that.
I'll never forget Roger Ebert's tweet at our producer, Kelly Santiago, said something like, I'm not too old to get video games, but perhaps too well read. But I will say this, to not sort of speak ill of the dead. Because Roger Ebert was amazing as a film critic, and I don't want to. But and to his credit, I think a lot of the kind of using him as a punching bag to kind of defend the game industry, he was nowhere near as sort of ideologically committed to that position as a few random tweets would suggest. And if you look into more of the conversations he had, I think he was more open about it than he was portrayed to be.
He went for a funny gag on Twitter. He went for
I think that's true. I think that's true. But either way, at the time, it did make me think, how do I define art? And it made me realize I actually think that literally anything that we do, there are monks who elevate breathing to an art. You know what I mean? Like, there's absolutely nothing I think that we could do that it couldn't at least be framed in those terms at minimum. Yeah. But anyway, okay. I'm sorry. I'm done. I'm really done. I'm muting myself.
The definition of art.
Oh God.
I tried.
Is the conscious use of skill and creative imagination to produce aesthetic objects, environments, or experiences. In which case, yes, I think kind of everything can be art. You have to use a skill to create something that is either an aesthetic object, environment, or experience. I guess aesthetic is a big word, but like you said, your spreadsheet could be aesthetically appealing.
Well, and also if you look at it, traditionally there has to be some like art. I think it was the Greek origin of the word, I think, was teke, which meant that art and the notion of technique were initially considered inseparable. Like the idea that something random could not possibly be art, but the postmodernists of the mid 20th century essentially pulled at those threads, and then you get people like John Cage writing a piece of music, famously the piece called 433, where the pianist sits at the piano and doesn't play a single note for 4 minutes and 33 seconds and then walks off stage. And the music, having been the audience's bewildered reaction, this is sort of one of the go-to examples of the postmodern movement saying, you know, well, where does the line fall? You know, you had all the so-called musique concrète, electronic, or what they kind of would call tape musicians, who would just make field recordings and say, here's my piece. It's the sound of traffic at the corner of 3rd and Broadway or whatever. And so, but I always look at that, like I remember the thought experiment I ran once was, say a garbage truck full of bags of collected garbage is driving down the street, down like a beautiful country road, and one accidentally falls off the back and lands and spills out everywhere. And you come across and you see this image of nasty garbage surrounded by beautiful countryside. Like, this happened completely by random and without intention, but your act of seeing it is already it's almost like your eyes almost become a frame around which this has taken on meaning.
My hot take is that I think for that to become art, you have to take a picture of it.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. Or at minimum, you know, stand there with somebody and make them look at it,
make comment on it.
Yeah. Yes, but I just kept trying to ask myself. Well, I kept trying to ask myself, what is the extreme end of it? You know, like, you know, I think it's really easy to fall into really pretentious silliness, but I still think it's fascinating to go, what is the line? What were you about to say, Mike?
I looked it up because I didn't want to, I was worried I'd said something stupid. So the thing I said of Kung Fu, I looked it up because I was sure this was a phrase that I'd found useful in the past. So Kung Fu apparently translates to energy and time. And that's how I would define art. Is it's got, and I'd say energy is the same as like intent or creativity. So the idea is that anyone who dedicates themselves to a purpose can achieve Kung Fu in it. So you can achieve Kung Fu with calligraphy or art or theater or cooking or whatever, right? That to me, I like that as a framework to focus on the practice of doing the art rather than the outcome of the art. So your garbage truck isn't art from my perspective, but the person who's trained their eye to capture that moment and to take a photo or something, as Alana says, that's when it becomes art because effort was involved. So one of my problems with, you know, AI and all that stuff is nothing AI generates has Kung Fu. It's not made with effort or intent, so it can't be art in from my perspective.
Yeah, I guess my only pushback on that is that energy / effort, as long as it can be a one-off. I think that the art that my 3-year-old niece makes the first time she draws is art just as much as the art that a 7-year-old painter who's been painting his whole life makes. I don't think you need to have practiced, but you do need to have
I mean the focus on practice. I would say it's good art versus bad art at that point. So as long as effort has been expended, the 3-year-old has expended effort. That probably more emotional energy than a grown artist does, because kids, you know, they're very focused and they want this to be awesome. Yeah, this matters. I would say it's the qualitative comes later of like how long did they work on it, how good are they? Those are things that feed in. If it's shit art, like all video games are art. Some are shit, some are excellent, most are in between.
I think that's where people fall into the trap of thinking that if we're having a maximally inclusive definition of art, it eliminates the idea that there might be some kind of hierarchy of quality. And I go, well, that
there can be
no one
art.
is asserting that. Yeah, like you can, if 99 or 100% of human endeavor can qualify as art, that doesn't mean that somehow 99% of it wouldn't be particularly moving to you. It just means I just go, I don't know what there is to gain by saying it can't be, other than usually it smacks of someone saying, well, when I do it, it's art, and when they do it, it's not. That's pretty much what it always ends up coming across to me as. And I'm like, well, it's pretty hard. Yeah, it's pretty hard to defend that. But anyway, okay, Gaudí.
Antoni Gaudí, everybody.
And And was he an architect or an artist? Sorry,
Architect,
was he?
if you will.
He was an very good, very good. I like
so
it.
architect who is Spanish Catalan specifically, and most famous for La Sagrada Familia, which is basically his magnum opus. It's this big ass church, not in the middle of Barcelona, because the land that they used to put it on at the time was actually a little cheaper. So technically, it was like not a central hub, but now obviously is because of all the tourism around it. I don't remember exactly how tall it is, but he made it so that it is half of a foot shorter than the tallest mountain in Barcelona because he didn't want to make anything taller than God. But when you look at that thing, it's pretty damn tall. And
especially compared to everything around it.
It's huge. It's the
dwarfs everything else.
Certainly the tallest church that I've ever looked at, and also the most beautiful by a mile. It's not finished yet. He died
No, they just officially announced the completion of it like weeks ago.
Alas, they did not. I also thought that and then took the tour. It is not finished.
What's missing? I mean, I thought that was the whole thing. I thought that was literally...
You'd have thought. Like, you'd have fucking
100,
thought.
What was it? 100 years to the day or whatever?
Very excited about this.
I bet you wouldn't have gone if you thought it wasn't finished.
Exactly.
You would have waited a few more years. Yeah. Absolutely.
I was like, and it's done. That's great. It's
too much kung fu. Too much kung fu. Too much energy and too much time.
Did they not time it to the 100th anniversary of his birth or his death?
It's not done. Again, I would have thought so. So what they did a couple of weeks ago was finally put I believe it's like 11-foot cross on the top, but there are still several of the like annexes that are not completed. And the elevator that's inside that will take 11 people into the cross is also not yet completed. It's like an elevator that then goes over to another elevator. So it's not done yet, but pretty damn close. Still covered in scaffolding, but allegedly it will always be covered in scaffolding because as soon as it's done, they then have to clean it. And then it's the same as like the Golden Gate Bridge. By the time that it's cleaned, it's dirty again. So they just constantly have to clean it.
I was just in Milan a month ago outside the Duomo, which is a similar, just mind-bogglingly imposing and unbelievable piece of human endeavor and similar, even more extreme than the Sagrada Familia in that it took something like 450 years to complete or something. I can't remember exactly, but multiple centuries to complete. And I've been there twice, several years apart, and you can the where the scaffolding is located on the exterior has changed because it's just in this permanent process of crawling around the building but it was amazing to go to the part that had been scaffolded when I had been there previously, which was now clean, and it looks as if it had been,
just construction
completed days earlier. I mean, it is so clean and gorgeous, and those are permanent processes.
Well, it's also, I imagine most churches are like this, but certainly La Sagrada Familia is they have to clean it all by hand. So not only did basically this architect come up with this idea to create a church that we'll talk about is incredibly beautiful. He knew he was going to die before it was completed, and during the Civil War, all of his papers were burned. But thankfully, he had made 3D models and effectively told the next generation of architects exactly what he wanted made. He had lengthy conversations with the artist who's responsible, whose name I unfortunately don't remember, for all of the stained glass paintings, which are incredibly beautiful, who still was allowed
those
to...
3D models also made through this kind of innovative hanging strings upside down? Basically, no one figured out the physics.
No one had done it before.
This work.
Very cool. The stained
it
glass
is
paintings...
very surreal. I mean, it is like being in a dream. I've not been inside. I've only been to the outside of it, but even the exterior.
So I actually thought the exterior was ugly, which is a little funny because I love a Gothic church, but Gaudi's very inspired by nature and also just incredibly religious, evidently, but almost like Park Güell, which is a park that he also was hired to architect design, I suppose is the word to use there, by Güell, who was the richest man in Spain at the time, is just full of so much religious iconography mixed with a lot to do with nature. So it's either animals or it's seasons, which is what the interior of the church is inspired by. But the outside of the church has carved trees and animals and also religious figures, but that because of the way that they're carved on the backdrop of what is otherwise like a little bit Gothic in design, it's kind of creepy looking. It's like a little Geiger. Like, it's a little weird. Then,
well, that's where he's pulling all that from as well, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Inverted, yeah.
You get inside, and it is genuinely, yes, like a dream. It is just unbelievably beautiful in that I usually find churches a little uncomfortable and generally don't want to go inside of them because I'm too woke. And my brain goes, look at all this fucking money that you spent on this repeatedly forever. That, you know, as this organization that purports to help people, they genuinely make me a little uncomfortable. And so inside of this is like going into an art gallery more than anything else, in that it's also very unique. But you walk inside, all of the pillars are designed in a way that Gaudí himself also was the inventor of, and that they sort of get smaller at the top and then branch apart like trees. So that they literally have branches that look very organic that go up to the ceiling. And the stained glass windows are really what makes this whole thing so beautiful. Is on one side, it is basically it's a rainbow around the church, but it's supposed to be representative of the seasons. So you've got summer, winter, I think are on the same side, and autumn and spring on the other side. But it basically, like, if you were to look around, it just like peeks through these beautiful blues and reds and oranges and everything. And as we were walking through all of this and like looking at how goddamn beautiful this church is, and just like the way the staircases are designed, like some of it's just so incredible. It occurred to me that a lot of what I do creatively is inspired by negative feelings. Like, I've said this on a recent episode of this show where I was like, the days where I feel like any kind of existential dread are the days where I write the most. And that I don't think I find enough inspiration in things that I love, which is all Gaudí did. Everything that he did is inspired by the things that he loves and the things that he feels positively about. As someone who had a pretty shitty life, like every single one of his family members died by the time I think he was like 21, except for, I think his niece, who he then basically like devoted. There's rosary beads everywhere. Maybe it's rosary. Thus rose. I don't remember exactly, but it's ultimately like there was one specific saint that he just like was obsessed with and owed his life to. And so everything is really dedicated to these two specific things, which is like the church and nature. And you see it in every single thing that he made. And there was something that I just found so incredibly beautiful about someone picking things they love, going, here's what it is and here's what I'm dedicating my life to, but also here's how I'm passing it on to other people. And I think the idea of it's got to be fairly unique to architects. I can't think of a ton of other, but there's certainly been a book series that have done this or works of art that have done this, but that you know that your plan is to pass it on to somebody else and that you've built in a whole system for that to go on. While again, he was not overly protective of it. Like I said, the stained glass, the artist who was responsible for making that did have instruction for how Gaudí wanted people to feel, but he didn't specifically tell him exactly how it had to look. So some of it kind of looks oddly modern compared to the rest of the church too, which is just very, very cool.
I do think that's a trait of architects. I mean, as a field, because obviously, like as a game designer, I've studied a lot of architecture. I've got an embarrassing number of books of different architects, and it is actually the pattern you're describing is consistent in the sense that architects, the whole, if you think of it as an artistic medium, which we should, I'd say more than anything else, they are building negative spaces for others to occupy, literally. And you see that come through when you hear architects talking about the things they design. They are always putting the person who's visiting the building first. It's very few architects that you read stuff by or study the work they've done are trying to make a statement at the expense of the people using the building. It's the other way around. So it's either they're celebrating God or, well, I mean, in the last 20, 30 years, you see a massive movement towards environmentalism. So like designing spaces and buildings that serve the people in the building, but also the world around it. There's a selflessness built into it. And I wonder if, I think that might be an aspect of what you're talking about. It's interesting. That just really clicks with what every word I've never seen an architect say, I have a vision for this building, and anyone who doesn't get it can fuck off.
Well, but then doesn't that like butt up against the common ethos that's if you make something for everyone, you're making it for nobody? And I would argue that he's almost not doing that, in that his inspirations are so strong. Again, I thought the exterior was kind of ugly because of the way that it includes just, there's names on there and there's fruits on there and animals, and it's all just sort of ends up looking like a blob. Like kind of like it doesn't. That's very reductive, but it's just a lot of noise. And I did not find that aesthetically pleasing. And I would say that like his compulsion even to make everything be so inspired by nature could off-put some people.
I don't think that
I'm definitely not saying architects design for everything for everyone. I think that's, but I do think I'd say more than most art forms, they design things to be used by other people. And then, and yes, there will, there's specific taste obviously as a part of that. But, someone like Steve Jobs, who I think Steve Jobs is the originator of the whole people don't know what they want until you give it to them. I think Steve Jobs coined that. But even Steve Jobs was trying to make the friendliest computer he could make that would be understandable to people. Like even the most opinionated, arguably quite bad bloke on a personal level to ever work in the creative fields, even he was still trying to make people a nice experience that they'd like. He really gave a shit about the fonts.
Certainly a thing that I feel like people forget about video games sometimes is that, they'll talk about Dark Souls being hard and not wanting an easy mode or whatever. And I always want to be like, that Dark Souls was still designed with you in mind to be able to finish it. These things are not just arbitrarily hard for no reason. Like they designed it in a way that it was finishable. It's still very specifically made for you.
I think it's why that's why architecture and design and game design kind of interact. I think that's one of the reasons I study architecture so much is for that exact reason. I think there is I think an artist paints something, and they're thinking about their audience, of course they are, but it's the act of consumption of art is pretty consistent in terms of the pure mechanics of how you do it. You walk up to a painting, you look at it, at some point you leave having taken something away from the painting. That's pretty consistent. Whereas when you look at like architects or game designers, or I'd say product design as well, is in the same kind of continuum, like you're creating something that you're going to walk out the room and then someone is going to hold it by whichever handle they think makes the most sense. And it's out of your hands in a way that I don't feel is true of music or art or even film. Like, you pointed the camera, you made a lot of choices. So yeah, I find architecture inspiring in that way. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely left feeling very inspired by it. And like, just the amount of community that went into a lot of his work. Like there's a lot of, he uses a lot of ceramics that go into mosaics. So there are a lot of mosaics around Barcelona in general. And one of them is at Park Güell, which is, they just used a whole bunch of people's from the era that they put the mosaic together in the park plates. So there would be people who have family members who it's just their stuff ended up in these mosaics in this park on these benches that are all like, dolphins and stuff like that. That means that there's always a piece of those people's families there forever in a way that, I don't know, there's something about like I often go to a museum when I visit somewhere, but this one got me in the timelessness of his approach. I found very inspirational. Not that I know what to do with it, but the taking of the past and handing to the future is a thing that he had to do and clearly did do, but was very mindful of the whole way through his work and very aware that it would happen. As he was building the Sagrada Familia, where he now lies, his tomb is there, he was effectively poor. He didn't have any money, but it's also when you're being allowed to make your magnum opus and it is fully funded and they're giving you food to do it, you're sort of rich at the same time. And allegedly that's what he said about it. He had no money to leave behind. Obviously he didn't have any family to give anything to anyway because they were all dead. But it's like just that's all he did, and all he needed to do with his life was just this thing that he knew he wouldn't be able to finish. Didn't even really know when it would be finished. Didn't know what would happen to it. And there's something very beautiful about that I don't really know like how I even take inspiration from it, but it was it occurred to me that a lot of what I do is, like I said, inspired by things I feel negatively about, or things that I want to change, or things that I want to criticize. And frankly, a lot of the media I like is the same. I just went and saw Leviticus in cinemas, which is an Australian film. It's very similar to It Follows, except that it is like directly about homophobia. And it's maybe too similar to It Follows, but otherwise is like very smart in that the movie makes you feel afraid whenever the protagonist sees the guy that he's attracted to. You also have that feeling of like, oh God, no, you please don't touch each other. Oh no, so this is going to be really bad. So I feel like that was like, I love when things can marry the feeling the protagonist is feeling with the exact feeling the audience is feeling. I did a really good job of that. But even that was like, I tend to gravitate towards things that are art as criticism, less so than things that are art as celebration. And it made me think that I need to make more effort to do that, like to find things that inspire me positively rather than negatively.
That was going to be my follow-up question, is if you had arrived in anything like that, because I'm very heavily in that side of the pool. You know, for me, 99% of the worthwhile timeless masterpieces are fragments of humanity that serve future generations by giving them things to aspire to, things to want to preserve and protect. It's all coming from a very positive and optimistic place.
Yeah.
There's very little art that seems to stand the test of time from my standpoint that has a kind of nihilism at its core. You know, you do have, of course, the genius of works of, say, like Dostoevsky, which can have a powerfully dark core, but there's still, actually, I would argue, still a kind of optimism, because he's essentially saying that rejection of the things that make us good is what destroys us in many ways.
Yeah, I don't think art can avoid that, right? I think the humanity will always shine through. There'll always be those moments. I can't think of a genuinely nihilistic piece of art that I would say is great. Like even something like The Godfather was the one that immediately came to my mind when you were talking there, of like, that is a film that's very critical of specifically American culture and American values, but then also has lots of stuff in it about family and about about the positivity of America.
Could you not say that Orwell is inherently nihilistic?
But all of his stories have a good person involved or a love at the core. Like you know, 1984 is about
who's the good person in 1984.
Well, and also,
I mean, the love story, I would say, is that's flowering amongst the awfulness. There's still the capacity for love in that situation.
I think
also,
that's lost.
Maybe
And also, he says he
overly
wants
fluffy
to murder her, so I'm not so sure about that one.
Well, also subjecting a good. I don't think the presence of a positive character makes it positive, because if the whole point of that character is to inflict horrible things upon them, that is an intrinsically negative or cynical work. It's more effective than if it was an unlikable character that you don't have any investment in, who then is made to suffer. So I feel like it sort of comes down to what's the takeaway.
Yeah, I see. The protagonist of 1984 is not likable, in my opinion. I don't even remember his name. I don't think anybody in that is particularly likable, but I guess the thing Orwell is handing off is a cautionary tale, and you could say that that's coming from a positive place, but that's still the same kind of thing that it
does feel a little almost retconny is not the right word for it, but it does feel a little bit like an intentional to sort of twisting of the interpretation to say a warning to future society in the form of a 1984 or an animal farm. Because it's not
even really, it's just a criticism. And I do think that those works will pass the test of time. They clearly have. They still
without
are.
A doubt. Orwell is one of the greatest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, without a doubt.
I mean, they're making an Animal Farm animated film. Have you seen this? It's fucking insane.
This is the
already
Andy
come and gone.
Serkis one.
Is it already out?
It looks terrible. It's
Yeah,
out and it's not good.
I heard it was horrible.
What a wild thing to do. But I don't know that I agree that things that are inherently nihilistic or critical or negative don't stand the test of time.
It's more that they rarely do. I think
it's harder.
It's more that it's harder to make a thing that people will feel motivated to want to share and make their kids read it or make their students read it or consume it or whatever. Because I think as a general pattern, life is by its nature challenging, and so much art has been created as an effort to provide solace and to add something beautiful to the world, to move us away from the baseline amount of suffering
Existential
that
dread
constitutes the default position.
Yeah.
And so, if it's a work that is reminding us of the default position of it, it might serve, like you said, there might be someone who said, like, for example, I have never been particularly interested in the kind of music that is meant to be kind of politically activist about the world as it stands now. And it's not that I think that is invalid as an endeavor, or that I would wish, anything negative or whatever to someone that chooses to use their time that way. I just think there are these eternal themes that tend to land on a kind of positive outlook of the world that just move me more. And given finite hours in the day, I just gravitate towards things that have a wider view. They're not.
Are you saying gravitate towards, or like you don't like do you not like Rage Against the Machine?
No, I would say by a law of averages of I've just been more moved by that which is
totally, yeah,
aiming wider.
I think I tend to agree that the things that move me more are things that I think are more optimistic or positively impassioned, perhaps is the best way to put it.
But also things like, if someone makes a movie in order to try to sway, like, let's say you write, let me try to think of a better example. Let's say I write a poem right today in the hopes that it will influence the forthcoming midterm elections. Like, it's explicitly trying to change people's minds or make them aware of something or whatever. In the short term, it has a very particular kind of almost utilitarian focus, but it's still approached as a work of art like any other. I'm just saying I have never been interested in making things like that, and I rarely ever consume it. But of course, occasionally, yes, I'll watch a movie or I'll see something that had a goal as explicit as that and go, that was fucking great. But it's an outlier for me.
Do you not think, though, part of that is in the flattening of history, that context gets lost? So, like, Rage Against the Machine is a good example, because Rage Against the Machine, my relationship with Rage Against the Machine is like, what's the song? Fuck you, I won't do what you told me. What's the name of that song? That song. Can't think what the name of it is, but
some of those workforces also burn crosses.
As a teenager, as a teenage straight white boy watching The Matrix, that was a song about how my parents were trying to keep me down and my teachers wouldn't let me do the things I wanted to do. And it was a powerful, awesome song that I listened to as a teenager and was like, this is badass.
Probably same, to be fair.
This is cool. Yeah, I think a lot of people were in that boat, and I discovered Rage Against the Machine through, probably, if I'm honest, through The Matrix, and that was what that song was. Now I listen to it, I'm like, oh, this was a different song than I realized as a teenager, and now it's got that meaning. I think that's true potentially of a lot of stuff, Austin, that you're talking about. Of like, in the moment, I don't know if Stravinsky had an opinion about the court and was trying to communicate that via
True,
the music.
He may have.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're not. Like, I think there's
absolute bangers could have been momentarily political in a way that we're not really paying attention. I like Rage Against the Machine, right? It doesn't matter because it's good, because it came from a passionate place, regardless of whether that passion was angry or positive.
So I think there's two aspects to this that converge that are both interesting. I think on the face of it, you're absolutely right. Something that might have been explicitly political and narrow in its focus. Over time, that context is lost. And I think, but to the argument that I'm making, I think it's a testament that there's something more in it, that it would stand the test of time absent that context. That it actually by luck or by just the inescapable genius of its creator, irrespective of their wishes, contained something more universal than even they were trying to make. And that's
my point, is we as creatives, we can't help but do that. Is Rage Against the Machine does earnestly capture the feeling of being a teenager who doesn't want to be told what time to go to bed, regardless of if that has anything to do, which it doesn't, to the intent of the song. Like, that's my point is, that's what's so cool about human created art, is we can't help ourselves. But instead, I read a piece, I read an article earlier, I think it was last week, someone did a retrospective on Subsurface Circular about its politics specifically. And they were pulling all of this stuff out of there that I definitely didn't sit down and go, this is what I'm trying to say. But they're absolute, like, the content is there. And I know from my own memory that that was the stuff I was paying attention to politically at the time. So I was channeling this stuff into the game without really consciously thinking about it, just because it was stuff that was interesting to me at the time. It was really interesting reading that. And same as the cliche example is Thomas Was Alone, I made while Kerry was working away, and I was kind of isolated and a bit bored in London and didn't have enough money to go out, really. And that shines through as that is a game begging for friends, basically. Like, Thomas Was Alone has that whole energy in it. And again, I didn't know that when I was doing it. I think people who make stuff, we are almost arrogant to assume that the intention with which we're trying to make the thing is actually the thing about the thing. Like, as long as we make it passionately, I think we are going to say things about our own humanity, about the times we're in, and about the things we're trying to say as well. But it's all going to end up in the soup at the end. And that's but I guess what I'm saying is the church beautiful because an incredibly talented person was celebrating God, or is it beautiful because an incredibly talented person was passionate and wanted to do, and it just comes through anyway? I don't know. I'm rambling, but there's I don't know. There's something about assuming intent, both of our own work and others' work, that I think is limiting potentially.
There's no way that God of War Laufey doesn't have a bunch of shit in there from me about watching my stepdad die. Even if it's not about that, there's no way that's what I was dealing with most of the time that I was writing on that game. And there's absolutely no way that there isn't a bunch of that in there, even if I would tell you there isn't. If it's most of what I'm thinking about at the time. And you might not know how.
And the person playing it might not know, right? The person playing it might never pick up on that. And you might never pick up on that. But it's there, and when people are discussing that game in 400 years from now,
of course,
it will have that quality.
Where they will go, death. Interesting.
I don't know when this episode's coming out, but I'm announcing my next
Friday.
game. It's out Friday. Yeah. Okay, so Wednesday, I'm announcing my next game, everyone.
Exciting.
And that's got some very obvious anger, which is the first time I've ever made a game that I've kind of let that be at the front of it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is I think I do a lot of stuff out of anger. However, I guess if I find it inspirational, then it works. But I don't know that I've ever felt compelled to write a story about something that I feel positively about. If I were to think about the thing that I love the most, it's the thing that I feel like the most positively, passionately about, it's the ocean. I really fucking love the ocean. And I will certainly be able to write more if I'm near the ocean. Or the most that I ever got done in a week was, I think, like something like 13,000 words. And it was when I was in Tahiti, just hanging out by the ocean. But I don't know that I've ever written anything about it in any capacity whatsoever, and nor do I feel like I have anything to say in a strange way.
You know what's hilarious about this is you went to one of the most kind of famous and historically important works of architecture, and this was your takeaway about this. I had the exact same thought earlier today watching the film WALL-E. The Pixar movie. Yeah. Because I literally watched. I was about half an hour. I'd not watched it since I was a kid. I watched it because a podcast I listened to was talking about it. I know I'd not watched it since it came out, I think. And just watching that film, in about 45 minutes in, I just realized this is just a film about how cool love is. Like, because you think about WALL-E and your memory of it, it's like, oh, well, it's like global warming and the disaster. None of that is actually important or relevant to the plot of the movie. The whole movie is a dweeb falling in love with a much cooler woman, basically. And that was just the whole story. And I was just watching, I was like, this is just love. I'm just watching a movie made genuinely with love and sincere desire to express positivity. And I had the exact same thought as you of like, I don't know if I've ever actually done that. I don't think I've ever sat down and
for me,
I think it's good.
The sequence, that movie came out
I've
while
actually
we were
not
working
seen
on
it for the
Journey.
record.
Oh my god, it's such a masterpiece.
I know.
Spoilers. It is genuinely, Alana, it's a masterpiece.
So I've heard.
I didn't realize until I watched it today. It's really good.
The scene where that movie
You're going to say
came
the
out,
dance.
the defined dancing scene to me is one of the Hall of Fame moments in all of cinema, as far as I'm concerned.
I wept. I was crying at because I just put it on this morning at like 11 a.m. I was sat watching this film and I just was crying in that scene. You should see it, Lana. It's good.
It came out
Genuinely
around the time that we were working on Journey, and I remember saying, if the multiplayer of this game can capture that dancing sequence, if it can capture that same feeling, then Journey will work. That was in one of the very first meetings.
I can see that DNA. I can see that link. I can see that intention shows up in Journey, definitely.
And I do think movies that say look, Alien is ultimately a movie that is critical of corporatism. That's what inspires the themes of that film. But you could also extrapolate, various other things. But that's the political through line of that movie is not a positive one. It is corporatism. People are expendable. The system sucks. And I still love that movie. But then if I compare it to something like Tree of Life, which is a movie that I don't like as much as I like Alien, and I listen to the
soundtrack every day. Like the soundtrack of Tree of Life.
I really like Tree of Life, though, in a way that, do I like it as much as I like Alien? No. But when I watched it, it sat with me for much longer. I sat with it, I suppose, for much longer. I felt more, even if I didn't like the movie as much, especially with that weird dinosaur bit, which is right in the director's cut.
This is where, for me, I'm only going to end up repeating myself, but I will say, and I actually have to run. But the composer John Powell, who has done a bazillion. He made it big initially about 25 years ago with like Shrek and Chicken Run and movies like that, and eventually came to be one of the dominant composers of animation, all the non-Disney, principally DreamWorks and Illumination, and his kind of magnum opus is the How to Train Your Dragon movies.
So good.
And I remember, and the funny thing is that glosses over all the brilliant scores he did for things like The Bourne Identity and stuff. But he's truly one of the single best composers alive, frankly. And he, at one point, stopped scoring. He was doing all these action movies in particular because of the success of Bourne Identity. He just had, he did all those Bourne movies, but then a bunch of others were coming his way, and do the occasional movie different from that. But at some point, he made a conscious choice to only score animated films and just stopped everything else for years. Only recently has he kind of expanded his menu, but it's still overwhelmingly animated films. And I remember once at a kind of public Q&A with him where someone asked about that. And he said, along the lines of our conversation, I'm really only interested in putting things in the world that are positive in nature. And he said, and the thing is, animation seems to be the only genre of film right now where you can unironically be unabashedly joyful, and it doesn't come across as you being kitschy or snarky or cutesy. Whereas, because you think about something like E.T., where, the finale of that film, John Williams absolutely goes for the jugular on as turbocharged of an optimism as has ever been seen in cinema. And any movie trying to do that now feels like it's a wink and a nod at best, or it's just cringe and feels insanely lame. But animation somehow escapes the loophole of that. And you can have a How to Train Your Dragon that's just, like the scene where they're flying in the clouds. And it's just beautiful, and it just makes you happy. And it doesn't feel like our kind of modern defenses come up going, what is this trying to pull here, or what? Yeah. And I remember thinking there was a beautiful underlying, almost moral code of him saying, that's all I want to really participate in with my creative energies at this stage of my life. And on that note, on the stage of your life thing, that may also be something that you notice over time. My all-time hero, for example, is the composer Jerry Goldsmith, who, early in his life, he was doing movies like Planet of the Apes and Patton and even up into the late 70s, movies like The Boys from Brazil. I mean, he did a wide range of things, but if you listen to a lot of his music in the 60s and 70s, there was this edge to it, this real thorniness. He had drinking problems, all kinds of stuff, but he was really interested in, and he thrived in, the darker parts of humanity. And as he got older, he started saying, I want to do movies more like Rudy and Mulan, and just kind of became a softie, and it was doing less. And I think as a composer, there's only so much you can do to kind of, force the projects at hand. Like, it's the nature of what you're offered, but we do tend to evolve. And it might be that at this stage in your life, that's what preoccupies you. But 30 years from now, you're only interested in the opposite, perhaps.
I mean, the individual human I am the most inspired by is still Carl Sagan. And I feel like I do at least do that, where like I see that as somebody who accrued knowledge and then did their very best to, without any gatekeeping, pass that knowledge on to other people in the simplest terms possible. And I'm not Carl Sagan, but I do try to do, that's what the YouTube channel is.
Well, you're made of the same stardust as Carl Sagan.
A blessing. Truly a blessing. I am persistently inspired by and do try to do. It's a shame that the games industry is so hostile to that.
When you order an iPad, it might just
Granddad's
be an
got his
Pro.
iPad now again.
Oh, bloody hell.
Sorry.
Well, you know how when you buy these, you can have them engraved, and mine has a Carl Sagan quote, which I don't know if
to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe. Very good, very good. I love him so much.
I want an Apple product as well. It's clever. Works well.
Didn't even know he did
Sagan
that.
Was the goddamn best.
Yeah, if we could all be a little more like Carl Sagan, then I definitely feel that. But also, not that smart and not that good at communicating. But I do my best to be more like Carl Sagan every day. And I'll take that. But otherwise, yeah, basically I just went and had this experience of looking at this art as someone who is not religious at all. And I think being wholly consumed by things that you love, to have the overwhelming desire to, even when you're dead, have it have an impact on the world and people's lives. Like they were saying that the people who clean the Sagrada Familia will be the same people who clean it forever, probably. It's a really difficult field to get into, is cleaning a church, and they have to do it by hand, like I said. So they will do that for the rest of their lives, and their kids might do it too. And it's I think something about that is very beautiful, to explore what you love. And I think maybe you make a good point there, Austin, that modern sensibility, happiness is cringe, or loving things is cringe, or people see it as insincere, or you're a shill, or whatever label that's associated with receiving something positively. If I have learned anything from Antoni Gaudí, it is to defy that. Love things and love them forever.
Perfect button.
And on that note, thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Alana. We'll see you next time. Bye.